Alrighty. So, and if anybody has questions, just feel free to speak up. I don't know that I'll have the answer, but I'll do my best. But today we're going to look at what supports the underpinnings of Agentforce, which is Data Cloud. So we're going to move beyond what of Agentforce, delve into the how, specifically examining Data Cloud as the foundational element that powers all of this automation. And it's not just a data repository for Agentforce. It is basically the central nervous system providing that unified and real-time data that Agentforce needs. And we're going to look at, the different aspects of that, how to prepare if you have an existing or it works actually with Agentforce. Does that sound good? All righty. So I have a little discussion point here just to open the floor up a little bit and see what your thoughts are on, why specifically Data Cloud is mission critical, right? And I'm not sure, show of hands, how many people have actually done any of these implementations for real. I have not personally done one myself, but not for lack of desire. Has anybody here actually done any of these implementations?
I have not.
No. Just some POCs, that's about it.
POCs.
Well, that's more than us, Leah,
So,
if you want to share anything.
So
There's lots of things I could share, maybe at the end of the call.
right, when we think about it, every customer we have, their data is everywhere. Their data is a mess, right? And it doesn't matter whose door you log into. Nobody really seems to have that single source of truth. Nobody has that perfect harmonization of the data. And when we mean harmonization, that sounds just like it is. All of your data is in harmony. And we really have to work hard first with our customers to make sure that their data makes sense. Because if the data doesn't make sense, it's going to be what we say in computer science world, garbage in, garbage out. So we need to have a unified view of the customer, because if we don't, Agentforce is going to have incomplete information. Your customers are going to have possibly, bad experiences if they are directly working with agents, or bad experiences if the human agents they're working with are, working with an agent that is giving them bad information. We need that real-time data processing. So, for example, let's say you go live with a promotion and there's something awry with the promotion. Maybe your targeted customer segment can't access the promotion, or the right values aren't showing up. Having that access to real-time data would give an agent, the ability to look at cases coming in, be able to see, oh, we launched this promotion, be able to match up the individuals logging the cases, or the email addresses are matching the domains in the target segment for this promotion, and be able to act on that accordingly. And then being able to identify specific customers across all of the touch points. And this sounds like a no-brainer, but a lot of times we come into customers where they have duplicate accounts. They might even have duplicate contacts. Just like in our world, in our customers' world, their contacts, their point of contacts jump around from company to company. And it's really difficult for them to be able to keep that, aligned when somebody moves from one company to another. So being able to accurately identify individuals is a critical point of Data Cloud. And then lastly, when it comes to marketing, we really, really, really want to have on-point segments. I worked at Capital One in their marketing department. I built segmentation engines and promotional engines. And this is something that is just near and dear to my heart, because there's a lot of human toil that goes into developing segments, a lot of statistical analysis. So having Data Cloud with AI is really going to be a powerful tool for your customers. So let's talk about real-time data and identity resolution. So if you have, like, for example, somebody who submits a high priority support ticket, the data cloud has all of this data to inform an agent on what to do. So, for example, if we talk about this promotion example, if we know that this individual has just recently been sent a promotion, maybe we can then check to see, has this individual attempted to access the promotion? Was there an error? Maybe they route it directly to technical support and they alert a customer service agent to contact that customer. Maybe they alert the manager of that promotional campaign that there is a potential issue, and that person can actually start working on damage control, crafting an email, looking into the issue, right? It gives you a proactive ability to identify who is affected, and proactively identify who to remedy to, so that you can minimize damage to your customers. But also, when we think about building experiences, especially with Experience Cloud, we hear that a lot of times customers, the driving force behind customers' retention is, I don't feel like I don't feel like you guys know me. You don't understand what I need. You don't understand what I want. Customers want that attention, just like we all do, right? We want to be known. We want to be heard as customers. And having a properly configured data cloud with clean data is going to allow the agents that access to understand the customers and then help the human agents understand the customers. So next, let's talk about Greenfield or Brownfield implementations. And they're very different considerations based on what you might be looking at. And when we talk about Greenfield, that basically means brand new instance. And that's usually everybody's favorite, right? Starting from scratch, starting from fresh. But even if you are starting from Greenfield, there's a lot of planning that has to go into your Greenfield implementation. You can't just jump in and run with it. So the first thing that you have to understand is that you need to define clear business objectives, because before you even start planning to configure, you have to understand why you need Data Cloud. What are the business outcomes that we're looking for here, just like any other consulting engagement? What cases are we envisioning that Data Cloud is going to support? Is it going to be personalized marketing? Is it going to be unifying your customer service? Is it AI-driven recommendations? Answering these questions is what helps you drive your data modeling and your integration strategy. Then establishing your data strategy, you need to develop a comprehensive data strategy that outlines your data governance policies, which is something that most people don't think about, but data governance is really important. What does that mean? It means who inputs the data, who curates the data, who makes decisions about, what the quality of the data is. All of those things are very important in maintaining your data so that your agents continue to operate at the maximum, efficiency and effectiveness. And a strategy, then you need to figure out, where is the data going to come from? So even if you are starting from a new Salesforce environment, you're going to have data sources from, beyond that bare implementation. You're going to have data coming in from other platforms, marketing platforms, ERP, all different kinds of places, maybe even some kind of lists that might be purchased. But you need to think about all the different data sources that are going to be feeding into your platform. And from there, you define your customer 360 vision. So what does the complete view of your customer look like? What are all the data points that define that customer? And what are all the interactions that you want to power through Data Cloud? And then assemble your cross-functional team, which means you need to have stakeholders from just about the entire organization: sales, service, marketing, IT, and an analytics team. The second point is data modeling and architecture. So here's where we want to take advantage of the customer 360 data model. So there is a recommended customer 360 data model as a starting point, but you do need to tailor it to the specific business needs and industry needs. You need to design for scalability and flexibility, because even if your initial data volume is low, it is going to grow. You need to build for growth, plan for growth. You don't want to, build yourself into a corner from day one. You need to understand how your data model is likely going to evolve as the business and expands and grows, and you're going to need to understand what are the future 3 to 5 year initiatives for the customer, or your customer, or you as the customer, so that you can ensure that your plan aligns with the business plan for the company. And then also making sure to plan for identity resolution from the start. You need to plan the rules. What are your identity resolution rules and processes? How do you unify your customer records around those rules? It's not sufficient just to use email and phone and address, mailing address, for example. Naming conventions and standards are also really important. You want to make sure that you have clear and consistent naming conventions for your objects, for your fields, your data values, and even and especially your processes. So looking up a customer versus looking up a lead, two very different processes. Then integration and connectivity. You want to make sure you know all of the different systems and sources you're connecting to. So is it Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud? How are these all going to talk together? How are you going to connect them? How are you going to keep them clean going forward? External integrations, again, ERPs, any kind of financial systems. Anything that isn't connected today is going to be connected as part of the implementation, connected tomorrow. You need to understand what is the data flowing in and out, and how does it unify back into your platform? How is the data going to be ingested? How is it going to be transformed? And then governance and security, these policies. And again, I can't stress this enough. How is the data going to be kept clean? Who's allowed to put data in? Who's allowed to change it? How is it retained? Retention policies. When do you archive certain data? Because after a certain time, data may not be relevant anymore, and it will need to be purged from the system. All of these policies need to be planned, laid out, approved before you go forward with your implementation. With respect to security, you need to understand the roles and permissions as far as who's going to be able to do what with which data. And of course, compliance. So GDPR, CCPA, anything like that, you're going to have to make sure that you are following all of those guidelines so that you don't fall out of compliance with any of those regulatory regulations, or if you're with I forget which one it is, but there are some other organizations that you may have a professional agreement with, that you need to maintain certain standards. Then skill sets. This is where we always run into the skill sets of who's going to maintain this going forward. So it could be data modeling, who's familiar with managing data, who's going to be identifying issues, who's going to manage the data governance, and then road mapping your implementation, which is something that we always recommend, because you can't eat the whole whale at once. You have to start with a small piece and consider what is priority and build from there. And that goes the same with your data. If you know that you have data you're going to be pulling in for this implementation, then you need to look at, how am I going to clean that data? Maybe the data cleanup part is going to be going on at the same time that you're building certain pieces out. There's a lot of thought that has to go into the road mapping. So that's a lot just for Greenfield. And a lot of that still applies for Brownfield implementations. However, with Brownfield, meaning there's already a Salesforce org that's well established, you have to understand the existing data that is there. How good is that data? How interrelated is that data? And perform an analysis on that data to figure out what is your strategy going to be. You have to, similarly, as you would look at the integrations you would build on a new platform, look at the existing integrations. Oftentimes, this is a great opportunity to perform some of the housekeeping items that have been building up over time. Part of those housekeeping items usually are the data is not great that's coming over. There are patches that are built to maintain those integrations. This is a great opportunity to streamline those integrations. And then any organizational challenges, again, governance and policies. We've talked about this, but a lot of organizations don't even have those in place, even though they've been working on the system for many years. And this is almost, I would say, a non-negotiable going into a brownfield. If your company or you as a company don't have proper governance and policies defined, you need to get those in place so that everything, and employ them so that everything stays in lockstep. You also need to understand technical complexity of any data migrations when you're going into a brownfield implementation, and of course, cost of resources, because at the end of the day, a lot of times we hear the question when we look at the cost of a brownfield implementation, oh my gosh, this is so expensive. Should we just scrap everything and go to Greenfield and go new? That's when you have to be able to estimate the effort of both Greenfield and Brownfield and the overall overarching costs, timelines, and prioritize to determine which one is the right choice for you. I know that was a lot. Any questions there? All righty, so go to the next slide, which basically is a pretty little graphic where when you're implementing Data Cloud for Agentforce, at a high level, you need to make sure that you model your data properly. So your data model needs to be vetted across your organization. So when you are looking at your data model, if you don't think you have the right players in the room, or if you suspect that there might be another organization that would be interested in that data, make sure that you interview and talk to them and review the data model with them. So even if they aren't part of your Agentforce strategy today, they may be part of your Agentforce strategy tomorrow. And we want to make sure that what we're building not only supports for today, it also supports for anybody coming on later. The connector strategy, again, just making sure that you understand all of the different systems that are providing data in, where data is going out. And then also identify your identity resolution setup. So all those rules that constitute an account or a contact's identity, make sure that you are running that across all of the different departments also, because they may have their own ideas of how to identify a contact or an account. So it's critical to understand everybody's idea of how to identify the identity of a customer or a contact, and then reconcile those against the different processes you're planning to build. So when you have an existing data cloud, you have to perform some tuning before you implement Agentforce. And the first step of that is a data quality assessment. And I usually hear or see a lot of dread from customers when we talk about data quality assessments and fixing the data. But it has to be done. As a popular phrase has been going around the media lately, you have to take your medicine. Unfortunately, like we had mentioned before, most of our customers, they're working at the pace of business, which means the shoemaker's kids never have new shoes. The data is almost always in some state that would not make for reliable Agentforce implementation. So make sure that when you are planning out an Agentforce implementation, that you amply plan to assess the quality of data when you're going into an existing org. Or even if you're going into a greenfield, you still are going to have to understand the data that's going to seed that new greenfield org. Then the second step of this is mapping the objects to the requirements. So you need to understand what the processes are, what what is Agentforce going to be doing? What are the different operations? What are the data that are needed to support those operations? And make sure that also the access policies align. So if a customer service rep is going to be using an agent to perform a particular function, that the customer service agent is going to have the access necessary to whatever data is required to support that Agentforce function. And then data streams, very similar to optimizing your data. We talked about this a little bit, but it's kind of along the lines of the integration. So any data that is moving from one place to another, you want to make sure that you're not having batch jobs that are running nightly, for example. That will not help having real-time data. Having real-time data is just like it sounds. If you have data that's coming in or data updates that are happening, those need to be propagated out to the rest of the org instead of batch updated, on a periodic basis, such as every hour. That's not a good strategy. There are a lot of companies that do batch jobs, and that is the first place to look to tackle to see what kind of critical data is being handled in those batch jobs. And if there is critical data that supports your Agentforce implementation, figure out how to make that more streamlined. And of course, performance monitoring. Monitoring is always a key piece to plan for after you have gone live, because if you do not continuously monitor the quality of your data, and again, this goes back to governance and automating your governance policies, your models will over time become corrupted and your agents will start hallucinating. And we don't want that. Any questions here? Alrighty. So how does Agentforce leverage the data cloud? Well, it uses it for powering its reasoning. So like we've mentioned with our marketing and identifying a particular customer, the agent needs to understand, once it can identify a customer, it needs to have a set of decisions. Those decisions have input parameters. Those input parameters come directly from data in Data Cloud. Continuous learning, again, this is anything that comes into the Data Cloud, any kind of interaction data, it's going to train your agents, your digital agents on, well, if this person takes this action and then typically always takes this second action after taking this first action, the engine can learn from that and build automations automatically so that, well, I see that you typically create a case after who knows, processing a particular type of input request or something. Those are the pieces where Data Cloud is going to, like any other AI engine and underlying database, it's going to feed and teach and train the AI on Salesforce. And of course, the personalized interactions, we've talked about that, and automated workflows. I think we've talked about that as well, where real-time data changes are going to trigger some kind of proactive engagement. Like we had mentioned, if there is a problem with a promotion, the agent can handle all of that, where it sees, again, by looking at the segmentation data, who was solicited in this particular offer, matching that up to who is submitting cases. You can pretty well identify with maybe some other data, if it scans the text of the support requests and saying, okay, this promotion name matches up with the promotion that was sent, it can automatically take the action to send an email out to the segmentation saying, we're sorry if you're encountering issues, please be patient, we're working on it, for example. So some of the real world applications here, and again, I have a little discussion point. We've talked about consistent cross-channel experience. We've talked about proactive service recovery somewhat, and intelligent sales assistance. Well, what kind of thoughts do you guys have on where you would see using this in your daily activities or for your customers. Meredith's thinking.
So not for mine specific, but like, obviously I sit around and think about use cases all the time. And my husband directs merchandise for another organization, and he has a large amount of data that they get from different areas. And that's what we've been talking about for the last few years, is consolidation of this data. And I could see where, and actually some of it's from old systems that they have just been kind of hobbling along. And we've just kind of talked about that. It's like having that unified place of data that because they don't have a lot of users, but they do need access to a large number of customers over time. And I see almost that data housing place as being a scenario where this would draw on it. It's not going to live in there every day, but they need to be able to have that interaction with that data over time. That was kind of one of the use cases that I was sitting there thinking about.
That's the perfect scenario to talk about a connector. And there are things called retrievers. I'm not getting into some of the technical data here or technical things. This is, overall conceptual, but you can build things to pull data from those external sources and bring in that intelligence. Great example. Thanks, Mariah.
Sure.
Anyone else?
Another example that we've been exploring, and I think could be applied to multiple companies and industries too. It's like traditionally we would think if we need to reference external information to support a call center or even to support sales or sales operations, we build an integration, have that be like a child object that holds maybe transaction history or invoices or whatever it may be. But exploring the use of Data Cloud to see, hey, how can we just stream this data in real time for a specific case or a specific account, whatever object it might be, to reference the invoice information or to reference the orders where we don't actually have to build it in our data model in Salesforce. And then using Agentforce on top of that too, of like, let's actually use that data to help respond to the customer or help create our quote. So we've been trying to explore things like that.
I love that, because you're right. So many times customers think that they have to have all the data on Salesforce. And not only does that create a challenge, because now you have to keep that data up to date. And what happens if you, modify the data on the source system? Now it has to, the modified, amended data has to be pushed into Salesforce, and who's, the source of truth, but it also eats up a ton of storage space.
Right. Yeah. A lot of times with that type of data, very transactional based. So high volume, is that really how you want to use your storage within Salesforce? Probably not.
Right.
Anybody else? I love this interactive part. I love hearing other people's ideas. So I work in a very narrow realm, so I appreciate hearing other people's viewpoints.
I think I'll just give a plug for this piece. For those of you that are trying to think through and are having a hard time picturing this, because we are talking about this in theory and not on a super technical level, when you go through the agent Blazor process, they give some really good use cases as a part of your projects that you work on. So I'm just throwing that out there for those of you that are going to be doing that. Salesforce has set up some great scenarios that will make you go, oh, okay, now I got it. Now I can picture that scenario and that use case where this is going to fit.
Awesome. Yeah, I haven't gone through any of that either. I haven't had time. I want to. Great. Thanks, ladies. So the implementation timeline, typically, what to expect before you jump into Agentforce, right? This is something that I think a lot of people aren't talking about. Everybody wants those shiny new toys, but before you get the shiny new toy, you have to clean up your room first. So all in all, 3 to 6 month journey, depending on the size, right? I think that's average. But if you've got a really large organization with a lot of data that's really complex and they haven't been maintaining it very well, that very well could balloon up to 9 months to a year. So it just depends. It's very case by case. So the next steps in building that foundation, right? Assess the current state, define your strategy, engage your stakeholders, start the journey. But the point here is to fully leverage Agentforce. You need to make sure that you are working with a robust and reliable, clean data source. So putting it together, when we want to actually jump into Agentforce and connecting it to the data cloud, obviously there are some prerequisites. You have to make sure you have an org with Agentforce provisioned and enabled. You need a functioning data cloud instance with your relevant data sources connected. You need your data harmonized. You need your identity resolution configured. And then you need your permissions set up, because as we know, we can't do anything in Salesforce without the right permissions. And then connect Agentforce to the data cloud. So at this point, you need to go to the agent builder and then select that agent that you're going to connect or create a new one. And then you navigate to the configuration, and it's a section, I don't know if this is the exact name, but data sources, knowledge integrations, and then select to connect to data cloud or customer 360 data cloud. You may be prompted to authorize Agentforce to access the data cloud instance, and just follow the on-screen instructions to grant it. And then you need to define the data access for the agent itself. So this is where you decide what data from data cloud the agent can access and how it can use it. Sorry, there's a fruit fly. So accessing your unified customer profiles, you will be able to specify, which individual or account objects that the agent can query. You'll be able to select specific fields from those profiles that the agent can read and use in its reasoning and its responses. You can leverage segments. So you can select specific data cloud segments that the agent can be aware of. This is so that the agent can tailor the interactions based on the customer's segment membership. You can utilize calculated insights. So if you've created those, like a customer lifetime value or churn risk score, you can make those available to the agent for more informed decision making. So if you think about some customer who's got high churn risk, that's very valuable information to a CSR. Then if you need to configure data mapping, you'll be able to do that as part of the setup, where you map data cloud objects or variables to parameters within your Agentforce logic or prompt templates. And then defining the data usage rules and the context. So you need to specify how the agent would use the data from data cloud. So for example, when a customer asks about their order status, query the unified individual object for their recent order information. Or if a customer is part of the high value customers segment, offer them a premium support option. So those are just a couple of examples, I'm sure, that can get your imagination spinning on different ways that you would be able to use this data. Then you integrate data cloud into the agent logic and flows. So you will use actions or steps that allow the agent to query the data cloud, to reference data cloud attributes, and trigger actions based on data cloud. So what that means is, obviously you're going to retrieve specific information based on the customer context or agent needs. You can use those data points from the unified profile or segments in the responses and actions, and you can initiate workflows or other actions based on changes or conditions that are detected. And of course, the most important part that everybody likes to skip is testing, testing, testing. You want to come up with every possible test case, test scenario imaginable to verify the accuracy and the relevance of the information provided by the agent, as well as the accuracy and appropriateness of any actions or automations that it triggers. So key considerations before you're jumping in to your Agentforce implementation with Data Cloud is the data governance and security, to make sure that your agents have access to information they should and information that they shouldn't. Make sure that performance is on point. So there are queries going on behind the scenes. So you want to make sure that they are efficient, especially anything that's going to be going to an outside system. And if there is, for example, a risk of a timeout, you want to make sure to be able to detect that situation and handle that accordingly, especially if it's a situation, again, with a CSR and you have a customer on the phone or a customer in the chat. With respect to relevance, you want to make sure that you have the most relevant data and prune out anything, just like we try to do in our discovery sessions. Keep it focused on what it needs to do and prune out anything that's irrelevant. Error handling, which is something that I tell my developers and my flow developers all the time. You cannot, it's like American Express, do not leave home without it. You need to have error handling. You never know what could go wrong, when something could go wrong. So make sure that you have the most robust error handling possible so that your users have the most, the best experience possible. We hear things of agents locking up, becoming irresponsive or hallucinating. We want to make sure that we can capture those scenarios. And documentation, obviously, making sure that your documentation is up to date and available. And that is everything that I have for today.